Bring Her Back is one of the creepiest films I've seen in a very long time. Bring Her Back is the second feature film from twin director duo Danny and Michael Philippou after their pretty successful debut a couple of years ago with Talk to Me. But if we go back before Talk to Me, go back even further, we can see a pretty interesting journey that hasn't exactly followed the traditional filmmaker formula. They started as YouTubers filming wrestling matches in their backyard before building up a channel with almost 7 million subscribers, and they have still been posting videos within the last few years. For two dudes who don't seem to take themselves too seriously, they've somehow managed to craft two horror films that are seriously good. With Bring Her Back, the Filippo brothers have created another horror film that is uneasy and very uncomfortable and hooks you from the opening shots. Before the audience is truly settled in our seats, they give us some pretty gnarly and intense ritualistic acts on some camcorder footage, only to abruptly cut to the title sequence and introduce a bright and colorful scene with a group of teenagers as they wait for the bus. And it's this sort of push and pull between light and dark and hope and despair that ultimately forms the foundation for the film, and in particular, the foundation of Sally Hawkins' character. In general, the film follows two step siblings, Andy, a troubled teen, you might say, played by Billy Barrett, and Piper, his partially sighted younger sister, played by Sora Wong, as they move into a foster home after the passing of their last remaining parent. And when they move, we are introduced to the brilliant and terrifying and absolutely creepy Sally Hawkins. I mean that in the greatest respect, as Hawkins plays their new foster mother, Laura. Pretty quickly, we see that something is going on at the property and might involve another foster child, Oliver, who is played by Jonah Wren Phillips. The casting overall is pretty top notch, with characters who actually look and act their age, which I always appreciate. Braces, acne, the teenage attitude, everything. And the relationship between Andy and Piper feels super grounded and realistic. Their kind of back and forth banter really encapsulates the love that they have for each other that's kind of hidden underneath these barbs and jokes. The choice of Oliver, this other foster child, was, according to the directors, an absolute no-brainer. They have publicly stated that there wasn't a second option that was even remotely close. And Phillips is undeniably creepy in his portrayal here. Again, I won't dive too much into his character. And it was effective even though I could not shake the aesthetic similarities to 11 in Stranger Things. I feel like it would be very easy to pull a still or two that look almost identical between those two projects, but regardless, he couldn't have done much better at doing what he was asked to do. Ultimately, though, the performance that stands out above all others is probably not all that surprising, Sally Hawkins. She is the character that is given the most nuance and range that she's asked to deliver, and she delivers it tenfold. And this starts to make some more sense when we understand how deep she dove into her character. She went as far as to add her own little trinkets to the set design from various secondhand shops that she kind of felt added to the space and to her character Laura's psyche. And she would stay in character before and after what would normally be a traditional start and end to a scene. And kind of as a result of this, or at least in part because of this, the twin directors actually veered away from a lot of cuts and resets and instead kept the cameras rolling to see where she would go. And after filming, after the project wrapped, the Philippou brothers received a pretty special gift from Hawkins, hundreds of pages of character notes that she had scribbled throughout the script and on some additional pages. Again, just showing how committed she was to this particular role. Beyond the character, something that stands out about Bring Her Back is definitely the sound design. The design is nuanced and it's very layered with a lot of subtle but important sounds that kind of coalesce beautifully. We have footsteps, we have deep breaths, we have rain, we have some echoes, and a lot of very small and intricate manipulation of sound. The most uncomfortable, but probably most memorable part of this sound design, or at least most memorable moment of sound, is probably metal scraping on teeth. I won't go into spoiler territory, but when you get to this scene, just know that part of the sound we hear is literally one of the directors, Danny, in this case, grinding his teeth on an actual knife, all captured by the sound designer. All in, they had over 700 layers of sound in this film, which does, again, slowly and intentionally build this immersive and creepy world. When it comes to gore, the gore in Bring Her Back isn't constant, but when it hits very hard. I'm normally not one who has too much of an issue watching whatever gore is being shown on screen, but there were two occasions in particular that I had to actively look away from. So if that sort of intense gore is not your thing, it might be worth avoiding the film, or you should at least be prepared to close your eyes a couple times. The cinematography from Aaron McCliskey, who was also DP on Talk to Me, is definitely effective, even if it plays it somewhat safe for the most part. We have a lot of slow zooms leading to this kind of inescapable sense of claustrophobia. But one of the most creative and effective visual choices comes from a few moments where the team uses an extremely shallow depth of field with nothing in focus, subjects only coming into focus near the end of the shot to kind of put the audience into the space of Piper, who is partially sighted and has described her vision as seeing mostly lights and shapes. So as a result of this technique, we see some pretty beautiful bokeh and blurred colors in these moments, which does, I think, help ground us in these specific moments and connect to Piper a little bit more intimately. The film ends on an absolutely gorgeous shot in its framing and just overall texture and layers. And again, I won't dive into any spoilers, but what I will say is that while the shot is almost undeniably beautiful, it might not work well with everyone, or at least might not hit everyone given some of its broader thematic implications or suggestions. Ultimately, Bring Her Back is really concerned with ideas of grief and loss and how far we're willing to go to save those we love. It pretty clearly and intentionally places some inherent contradictions together for the audience to try to digest. This creation of pain to somehow absolve pain, using evil to breed a sense of hope, and this never-ending, often unconscious shifting of blame as an attempt at self-preservation. Given the pretty twisted nature of this film, this sort of exploration is tricky because it requires viewers to take a step back from the immediate horror of what they are witnessing on screen and examine the broader contextualized nature of pain and suffering. I think for most folks, Bring Her Back is overwhelming in its unease, so this additional layer is largely ineffective or at the very least minimized. Still, I'm a fan of what the Philippou brothers are doing in this horror space. They're able to take some fairly worn genre tropes and twist them into something at least approaching new and inventive, and they do so within a very modern context, so it does feel fresh. They have somewhat stylized productions, but they don't place that ahead of the story, and they seem to, at least so far, be able to consistently bring the best out of their actors. So whether you love it or not, I'll definitely be in line for their next feature. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, comment, like, do all of those things to support me as a human being. Appreciate you. Have a wonderful day. Thanks again. Cheers.